Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Nearshore Cafe podcast, Season 2. We are very excited to have Joaquin Paños on the pod today. Joaquin is an expert on cross-border payments for freelancers and contractors. We're going to get into that in a second. So if you are interested in that space at all, you're working abroad, you've got team members abroad, you're going to learn a lot today. Before we do that, let me just give a quick thanks to our sponsor. That's Plug Technologies, plugg.tech. Plug is a great way to find, as we're talking about contractors with Joaquin, it's a great way to find those contractors, those software and tech contractors for growing companies in the U.S. But without further ado, Joaquin, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Brian. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Well, I gave a little teaser about Tumo, and that's maybe where I want to start. What a big space, what a growing space. You know, we started to see. It's not like outsourcing and offshoring haven't existed forever, but more than ever, I've seen this space take off with solutions for payments and everything. So maybe just tell us a little bit about the problem space period. You know, what is the problem that we're all trying to solve here?
Good. Well, it's great to start with that question. I think that when you look at this space in the remote ecosystem, and let's talk about the ecosystem at least in Latin America in general. It's very similar, but what you see is that there are 6 steps in the customer journey when looking at it from the worker side. But this does involve both parties, like the hiring company and the worker side. But first, you have you could call it the talent sourcing. So you have a lot of businesses who are doing this, like matching the talent in Latin America with the companies in the US or in Europe. Then you have the compliant hiring part, which is important. So after you find the talent, you have to make sure that this talent is hired compliantly. You have the payroll, which is the third step. So making sure that these workers get paid correctly and giving a solution for the businesses that hire them. And then you have what we call the last mile, which is giving these workers a place where they can get paid. So it can be a digital wallet or a bank account. Most of the solutions are borderless, but what we see in Latin America is that there is a preference to get paid in US dollars, and ideally with a bank account in the US. So now you have companies solving that. And then the last 2 are transferring the money abroad, so sending it, say, from the US to Argentina. And lastly, the tax part, which is, okay, I've done all this, I received my money in Argentina, but now I need to pay my taxes. How do I do that? And there's a lot of uncertainty over there. What we see is that there are now more and more solutions for the different parts of the customer journey. And we, in particular, in Tumo, are focusing on that last mile. And right now, starting with the very last part, which is the taxes, where we see that there's not a clear tech solution in general. And this is one of the main concerns of workers. And let me just develop a little bit more there. What we see is there's a huge shift that happened in the last few years of mostly people working full time, who now moved to this working full time for a company, a local company, but now they have moved to working remotely for a company abroad, and they're hired as a contractor. And when they're hired as contractors, that's when most of these problems happen, because all of a sudden they now have to take care about everything, and like an independent worker does, and things that they didn't have to do before, such as paying the taxes. Because in most cases in Latin America, companies do those things for their workers, but now they have to do them themselves. And this is where there's a big problem and an unsolved problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you know, speaking from my own experience, you know, working in Argentina personally, and you know, it feels like there's kind of 2 leaps that a lot of these people are making. They're kind of skipping over working as a contractor for a domestic company in Argentina, just because all the work is in the U.S. So they kind of go from there's a FEEP, which is like the IRS, of Argentina, and they've got their aguinaldo, and their taxes are all covered, and their benefits, and um, yeah, the downside, of course, is the it's very complicated. Like I remember trying to model this out once, and like can we just use 38% or something as our placeholder for extra burden, extra employer burden? And they're like, no, 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 like there's so many different nuances, you got to figure this out. So it's also complicated on the employer side.
Hmm.
So I'd like to get into that part in a second. But just the employee side, yeah, maybe talk about uh, this big shift in people kind of leapfrogging the domestic contractor world and going straight to the U.S., and why this is becoming a bigger problem every day.
Okay. I would say that as Latin American economies become more unstable, and specifically as the gap in salaries between Latin America and the US widens, and this is because salaries in the US are generally like getting higher, it's becoming more and more attractive for people who live in Latin America to work
Mm,
for companies abroad. And since now we're having a lot of digitally native companies where from the get-go they start hiring people abroad, this is becoming easier
yeah.
and just for people to find these jobs abroad. And Latin America has a huge advantage where the time zone is very favorable for companies in the US, and you have a high percentage of skilled labor professionals, a lot of professionals in the tech world,
Hmm.
and high levels of English speakers.
Yeah.
So all these helps for this shift and this transformation, and just people starting to look for jobs abroad.
Yeah. Now you're from Argentina, uh, which I've seen is almost like the perfect use case for this. Where very volatile economy, very volatile currency, and a country that is just uniquely suited for the U.S. market. Um, how about the other countries in LATAM? And there's many. Are there others that like this is they're way behind or decades behind, and this even being an issue for them? Is it similar in other places?
Yeah, good question. Definitely, Argentina is you could call it the worst or the best example. It's up to you. We have all the problems combined and multiplied by 10, where inflation is a very bad thing. And that's why also people look for salaries in dollars, in US dollars, to be protected from inflation. But these problems appear in other countries in different ways and in different levels. But what I was saying before about that gap, that salary gap widening, that is happening in all the countries. And that's why it's just it's a trend that will continue to happen. That it will be more attractive to work for a company abroad. Then some things will make it more or less appealing, such as the fact that people are hired as contractors when you work for a company abroad. Then it's up to the worker to gauge how much or how favorable it is to maybe give up other benefits, such as the equivalence of 401k, prepaid medicine, not having to do your taxes, those things that are solved when you work full time for a company, for a local company, and that you again have to give up when you work for a company abroad. When you take the case of Argentina, because the salary gap is so huge, it's almost an easy answer. And with that, with the extra money that you get, you can pay whatever extra thing you need. But maybe when you take the case of Mexico, where salaries are already pretty high, well, it's up to the worker.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's interesting you bring up Mexico in particular because I've seen more tie-in to like the full-time worker, the pension system. No one wants to like leave that entirely, because it makes life a lot harder. Do you see that too? And maybe because of that, the total addressable market might be a little bit lower for Tumo in Mexico.
Yes, although the trend is, as I was saying, you will see more and more people like move to this way of working. But what's interesting is Mexico is also now a place where a lot of startups are starting to settle there, and there's a lot of hiring from Mexico to other companies. I mean, other countries in the region. So you do see a lot now, for instance, of Argentinian workers who live in Argentina but work for Mexican companies. It's also happening a lot with people who live in Colombia and are now starting to work for Mexican companies. So it's an interesting mix that we're getting where it's not just working for a company in the US or Europe. No, Mexico is also a country that's hiring a lot. And I'm starting to see Uruguay as well as a place where companies are, having their like they're settling there and hiring people.
So Joaquin, I want to talk a little more about the product vision for Tumo. When you were concepting this, and even today, as you're further along, is this a consumer app? It's really built for the freelancer, or maybe where does that business come into play with the product?
Perfect. So yes, we did think of this having the worker and the consumer in mind. Just to give more context, what we're building is sort of a turbo tax for Latin American remote contractors and freelancers. So we take care of everything that's tax related for these people, and we did think of it as a consumer app because even though there are different possibilities of providing these through the companies and them as you could say channel sales channel or marketing channel. The ones that really have the needs right now are the workers, because as I was saying before, these independent workers or the way that they're hired makes them have to be responsible for their own taxes, and a company cannot do the taxes for one of these workers because if they're hired as contractors and if the company gets involved too much, the hiring company, then they risk falling under misclassification, right? And
Yeah,
there are a lot of potential issues that are tied with this. So it's very important to provide a very good service for the worker here, really good UX and a good experience because the end user are the workers.
yeah. And then just curious more about the product. Is this mobile first, mobile friendly? How did you guys think about that?
So it's mobile friendly. It's a website, and we're using now a combination of tools. We're also using some WhatsApp to provide service and mostly
Hmm.
to answer the different questions that users may have because, well, WhatsApp is very popular in all Latin America.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
second, it's normal to have a lot of questions related to taxes in general and what's reported, what's not, what do I have to do. Um, and one other thing that is important is that no one likes paying taxes. No one is happy paying taxes. So we have to make sure that this process is as smooth as possible for the people, easy to use. And one of those things is making it web friendly and being able to access it from the browser, because I really wouldn't be willing to download an app just to pay my taxes. So the easier it is, the better.
yeah. Now I wanted to maybe go back to something I hit on earlier with. It's not a very clear. Well, maybe take Argentina for example. I didn't find it to be a very clear place. Like
Yeah,
registering a company and what to do, and so
I know where you're going.
yeah. So 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 maybe I'll ask it, and then if I'm feel free to add more context. But I imagine to build a software, you've got to be able to fit this into the rules and the tax rules and regulations of the country.
Yeah.
And for a ambiguous country, um, how did you go about doing that?
Good. No, that's a great question. Um, in short, I would say that our approach is an Uber-like approach.
Mm,
And what I mean by this is, let's take the example of Uber. When they launch, they don't say like, "Hey, I'm going to launch in Spain." They say, "I'm going to launch in Madrid specifically, or in a
mm,
certain area of Madrid." We are taking the same approach because what happens with independent workers, this applies to almost every country in Latin America. One of the good things is that there is a national tax regime, or like structure that applies to no matter where you live in that specific country. It's the same regulation for
mm,
independent workers. Same thing happens in other countries, but then you have like the localization part of the
mm,
different states or provinces, as we call them here. So what we are doing now is we're just operating in Argentina right now, and what we're doing is providing our service for the country, but for specific provinces, making
mm,
sure that everything is working correctly and that we get all the laws the right way and the tax regime, and then slowly expanding to other provinces and in the future other countries. One of the important things is making sure that you are on top of everything and are like stay up to date with whatever change may happen.
mm.
But what we see is that companies um, are the ones that suffer more these changes because it's more frequent for companies than for independent workers. So this is a positive thing, although there are changes all the time, but not as frequent.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I see a strong correlation, with how the U.S. Like if you live
Yeah.
in New York, if you live in New York City, you're paying certain taxes or restaurant taxes, and you don't do the same thing in Wyoming, which is a low tax state, and that makes
Hmm.
a lot of sense. If you're in Ushuaia or Salta or wherever, it's just a completely different thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Uh, just talk about Tumo, the company, for a second. Where are you stage wise? Tell us a little about the team, the traction. Would love to hear more about that.
We are in the early stages of developing the product and testing several of these things with users. We started doing this, like working with Tumo with this product in mind earlier this year. We formed a team of developers and designers in late May, early June, and that's when we started with this. And what's interesting is that originally our idea included doing remittances as well. And as we started doing progress and testing and just like doing a lot of customer interviews and discovery, we found out two things: that on one side, the remittances and that transfer market is getting crowded with good solutions, and on the other side, no one wants to get into taxes, and there are no good solutions for taxes. I think it has to do with the fact that it's not a sexy problem. No one
Yeah.
wants to work doing taxes, and also the fact that regulations are complex. So that's when we decided to focus on just doing taxes. We started testing with users, giving the solution, this full solution for independent workers slash remote workers, just 2 months ago. Now we're close to hitting 50 users. We want to
Mhm.
make sure that we don't want to grow too fast because we're still doing several things manually while
Mhm.
we develop the product, and we want to make sure that we give a very very good service, because it's really important that if you are paying someone else to do your taxes, you have to feel that trust, right? And you want to make sure that you will not have a problem in the future. And this is a very important part for us, the quality of the service being on top of the users and whatever they need. So combining doing their taxes with providing a good customer service is important, and that's why we're limiting the speed of growth. but we do see our wait list growing a lot and generating a lot of interest. So it's good to get those signs of validation and traction.
Sure. Now, I had spent some of my career in the fintech world, and getting the tech stack right, is very
Yeah.
important for that. It's got to be reliable. How did you think about the tech stack? And if you don't mind sharing, some of the technologies you're using.
We're using the front end is mostly React and
Hmm.
Next.js. We're using a combination there. We're transitioning a bit more into Next. And for the backend, we're using Java because it's a very popular language
Sure.
for
Yeah,
both to like in the fintech space and also to just in general. There's a lot of developers who are very who have a lot of experience in Java. So those are the two main languages that we use. Um, we use a lot of AWS services as well to get set up and to get everything running. And we are now preparing to do some scraping on different websites. I don't yet have an answer on what specific language we're going to use, but we're like this is going to involve a lot of Python and machine learning as well.
that's great. Yeah, great choices, obviously, on AWS and Java. And I'm sure investors and users care about reliability and so forth, and that matters quite a bit.
Yeah, what I didn't say is that security here, of course, is a huge part, and Java is very good for that.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah. Um, I wanted to also talk a little more about your education, the MBA at Berkeley, in particular, and tell us, about your journey into that program and your experience.
Okay, so yeah, I started my MBA journey 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years ago, August 2021. It was my first time moving abroad. So I had lived in Argentina my whole life until then. And I have always worked in tech companies and technology involved in one way or another. I have always really liked tech in general. And I knew that I wanted to go to like Silicon Valley, be as close to Silicon Valley as I could to just get more in touch with these companies, with technology in general. And because I also know that I wanted to start my entrepreneurship road,
Hmm.
and just being there was excellent for that, close to VCs and other startups and all like that entrepreneurial spirit. So, as I was saying, August 2021, I moved there, started classes in Berkeley Haas, where I got my MBA. And I would say that from early on, I knew that it was the right place, the right people there. One of the things that there's in common among like all the class, it's not a big class. It's just in my year, it was 292 people, if I
Hmm.
remember correctly.
Hmm.
And the thing in common is that it's all really good people,
Hmm.
and like they have a good heart, and that's what I have always valued the most. It's very kind people, very generous people, always willing to give you a hand with anything or just have a talk. And having that those sort of classmates and being so open-minded just helped a lot with exploring different things. If I wanted to have a conversation with someone who worked in VC, I could do that. I could just send a Slack message and organize a coffee chat or something. Someone who had worked on a startup or who was planning to build a startup, and that also facilitated for me what happened next. I met one of my classmates was Ricky from Ecuador. He's one of the co-founders in Tumo, and we in second semester we decided to take a class together which was called Lean Launchpad, and that's when we applied with the idea of Tumo. It was a little
Hmm.
bit different, but we started pivoting, doing a lot of customer interviews, research, just in general. We ended up just that class after 4 months or so of classes with over 140 interviews to
Oh,
people
wow. That's great.
in that space in general, who sent money, who were lawyers, who had something to do with the space, accountants, a little bit of everything. So that was just fabulous. And after that class, I knew that this was what I wanted to work on in the future. So the remaining year, I earlier this year, January 2023, we applied to UC Launch, which is a program and incubator, and that's part of like the whole UC university.
Mhm.
That also helped us with Tumo. Then we got into Skydeck, Path 13, which is
Yeah,
like a UC Berkeley affiliated accelerator. Lots of good startups and entrepreneurs are coming out from there. So all of those things helped a lot, and it was a great experience.
sure. Yeah, I'll tilt my laptop for a second. I'm wearing my my UCLA Anderson. Yeah, so we're all part of the UC system together, which is
Perfect.
great. Yeah,
Yeah,
Skydeck is an awesome incubator as well.
yeah, yeah. And the whole UC university is just great.
Yeah,
And in that UC launch program, there were people from different universities, from UCLA as well. And it was just an amazing experience getting to know all of them, different backgrounds, just great.
yeah. And then I also wanted to ask about your time at Mercado Libre, which is really one of the most successful companies ever from Latin America. And
Yeah.
what were some of the lessons or learnings that you took away from your time there?
Great. Uh, I think the culture is so important, and the work that they did on the culture, they have this thing they call the Meli DNA,
Hmm.
which are the six principles that everyone sort of has to follow, or that that bonds people. Um, and there are a couple that I really highlight that just following that made my job easier,
Hmm.
and I think everyone's job easier. I could say that I sort of follow those principles already, and being part of a company where those principles are one of the most important things just makes like everything so much easier. One of those is what they call beta continuo, or continuous beta, which is like we're always iterating and
Hmm.
trying new things. uh, the other one is competimos en equipo para ganar, which translates to we compete as a team
Hmm.
to win. And those two things, I think, that make the fact not only that people are just motivated to work, but also, I don't want to say motivated to make mistakes, but
Hmm.
the fact that if you make a mistake, but with a really good intention behind, and just like making sure that with the customer in mind, which is also like one of the principles, and with like making, like, if it's, you know with the motivation behind that, you really want to improve things and make it easier for the user and just provide the user a better experience. I think all those things combined just make your work easier. You do end up working more, but you all work as a team, and just like the results end up being visible. Amazing, amazing culture, amazing team in general. The best professionals I have ever worked with
Yeah.
were in Mercado Libre. So yeah, just an amazing experience, and also a great, you could say, school for me to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Um, Tell us more about your upbringing. So we've talked to a lot of people from Buenos Aires, the big city,
Yeah.
but you're from down south. Tell us more
Yeah.
about exactly where you're from and what that was like growing up so close to the ice.
Yeah. Well, so I grew up in Tierra del Fuego, which is the southernmost part of the continent. It's a little island that's right above Antarctica. And I grew up there in a city called Rio Grande. So there are two cities. One that's called Ushuaia. That's the most popular one. That's where the different ships go and where the
Mm-hmm.
tourists go. There's a ski center. A little bit of everything, and it's known as the southernmost city in the world. Uh, it's also known as the end of the world.
Yeah.
Um, and the city that I grew up in is just like, I think it's like 150 miles away from that one, a 2 hour drive, more or less. And it's a little bit up north. And I think it was so different to living in a large city. uh, the population back then, where when I grew up, it was around 50,000 people.
Okay.
So one of the things is that everyone knows you. It happened mostly with my parents, right? So I would be like in the streets, and they would ask me like, hey, are you like your father's son, or your mother's, like, I know your dad or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was a really good experience. At the same time, growing up, I always knew that that was not where I was going to stay, because it's sort of typical that uh, the kids, as they grow up, they know that they're going to go to the university elsewhere in Argentina. That was my case. So I was sort of prepared all along to leave the city and then go to Buenos Aires. But one of the things that I think was interesting is that I knew that I was going to leave, and that just made it easier, like leaving my parents' house, because that's what I knew that was going to happen.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I felt this, like, when I moved here to Buenos Aires, which is where I'm based now. I knew that I had to really work hard and study a lot, and then like get a job and just be responsible in general. So for the first couple of years, when I moved here, I had sort of like this intensive course on growing up and becoming an adult. It
Hmm.
was different from most of my classmates from university who were still living with their parents. Of course, not everyone, but it had some benefits, some downsides. Downsides were that I had to like do the chores and go to the supermarket, pay the bills, whatever in my apartment. The one of the positive things was that my apartment was close to college and to the university, so most of my friends would like come to my apartment. After that, we would study together, we would party together, and like lots of stories happening in my apartment, because I was the one who was living by myself. I did
Yeah.
live with my brother for some years, but we were in a similar situation, so that
Yeah.
was fun.
Yeah. One topic we hit on with a lot of our guests is food,
Hmm.
and with your experience abroad in Berkeley, and then also growing up. If anyone were to visit Ushuaia or your hometown, just give us like one restaurant recommendation that people have to check out.
Good. If people go down south, specifically to Ushuaia, they definitely have to try the king crab. Um, I don't think I recommend any restaurant in particular. Just like if you see that there's king crab in that restaurant, just go in and try it, because
Yeah,
it's always really good, and you don't find that elsewhere in the country. It's only down there in that island. So
yeah,
definitely get king crab.
yeah. And then how about your time in the Bay Area?
Oh,
Any particular types of food or restaurants that stand out for you?
I became a huge fan of bubble tea. So there's in Berkeley, I think in the whole Bay Area in general, there's a lot of bubble tea places everywhere. And you don't get those here in Argentina. I saw a few now, I think two new ones in Buenos Aires in the last, yeah, couple of years. Whereas in Berkeley, you have one every 2, 3 blocks, maybe.
Yeah,
And I think I visited at least 20 different bubble tea places, and I loved it. I became a huge fan.
that's funny.
So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's a must for me.
In another conversation, we'll have to talk more about that. I almost became an investor in a boba tea franchise. So
Nice.
for another day, we'll have to talk about that. But I
What's
did
the
do a
correct
lot. Yeah, but
what's the correct way of saying it? Is it bubble tea or bubba tea? Like, I'm not
so
sure.
either one, honestly, boba or bubble, either
Okay,
one. Yeah, but they
good.
both come with the little tapioca balls. Yeah. Um,
So good.
so, yeah, but yeah, we'll have to talk about that some other time. I did a lot of customer interviews with
Oh,
people like you
nice.
that drink a lot of boba tea, so it was funny.
I would be your client.
Absolutely. Well, maybe there's an underserved market in Argentina right now for boba tea. Who knows?
I would love to build something that's bubble tea related. Yeah.
That's great.
Trust me.
That's great. And then one final question for you is about language. With English being your second language, we talked to a lot of people from the States, like their favorite Spanish word. How about English? Is there a favorite phrase or word that you picked up from your time in the States?
Tough one. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think I got this a lot. I didn't used to say this. It just stuck with me.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing, but I do say it a lot now. And let me see if there's something else. I'm really not sure.
That's
Well,
okay.
that was a tough question.
Yeah. Well, I will say that entonces is
Yeah.
a much more pleasant way of
Yeah,
kind of like breaking the conversation. So I wish English had something like entonces, but we just have
you're right.
and ah and like and stuff. But
Well, I think you know what? I had one like public speaking class in Berkeley, and I realized there, and one of the feedback that I was given by my classmates and the professor is that I say so a lot, the
yeah,
same way I would use entonces in Spanish. So I
exactly.
try to I use that as a kind of like to begin the sentence, and what I've been practicing is saying it less often because it was not good. I would say it a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation today. This is fantastic. Joaquin, where can people that are interested in Tumo, where can they find it?
They can go to tumo.app, the website, or they can also find us on LinkedIn as Tumo. We're now getting a lot of people to sign up to the wait list, so that's where they can find the link to the wait list. And if you feel that you want to talk directly to me and ask some questions, I'm always open to have any conversation, see if I can help you in any way. So you can also look me up on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to, yeah, set up a meeting or just chat, whatever you need.
Fantastic. Well, let me thank our sponsor one more time. That's Plug Technologies, plugg.tech. Great way to find software developers all over Latin America. Thanks again, Joaquin. Great to see you.
Thank you very much for having me. It was very, like, so much fun, and I hope you will stay in touch.
Absolutely. Until next time, we'll see you all on the Nearshore Cafe podcast. Thank you.